Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Foreman community demo. I remind you that for questions, we are on the Foreman on IRC and on Twitter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please check that your settings are on a higher quality so you can see our screen sharing. So for those of you who have been following, you know that since Greg left our team, we've been functioning as a community team. And we had a few people, Raul, Tomer, and myself, that have been the community team together. We've done quite a few events in the past year. We've had a lot of demos, a lot of releases in that time. We've actually been so busy that we decided that we should bring back the community manager role. And so we're going to have a new community manager starting on the 1st of April. The rest of the community team is still going to continue, but will be a little more in the background. Obviously, we're all available if you need anyone. Our next demo is on the 2nd of April, so we should have the community manager here to represent. That demo will still be run by me, but at least you'll get some introductions then. We have Foreman 2.0 RC2 is already out. RC3 is coming very soon, so we would appreciate if you go test that out so we can get to the 2.0 version fast. Thank you for everyone that has already reported. So now let's start. Mark has a few things to demo today, audit, subnet, and some macros. So Mark, moving to you.
All right, thank you very much. So I'll start with showing some enhancements on the audits page. So as you probably know, we have this page which shows you the history of changes in your Foreman instance. So whenever you update or create or remove some resource, we have a record for that. And one thing that we always did, but actually never exposed in the UI is we also store additional information about the request during which that happened. So every HTTP request gets some UUID as an identifier, and we store that into audits table in database. Now, when it's really useful is if you scroll down through your history and see something that is weird, like maybe something you're interested, maybe an audit that you've searched because you've seen the hardware model created with this value, and you want to know how that happened, who created that. Well, you can see who created that easily from this page. But if you want to see what else happened during that request, you can see we now display the request UID in here. And if you click the link, it will automatically filter all the audits for that given request UID. So you can see what actually happened. And it started by actually adding a new interface, creating a new host. So this is probably a host creation, because when we get effects for a host, we parse them and create the hardware model, we create the operating system, we create the domain and things like that. So you can see actually what happened during the whole request and the facts were uploaded. So that's one enhancement. The second small enhancement is on the subnets page. So I have a few subnets in here. By default, they are ordered by the time of creation, but people wanted, obviously, if they have a big number of subnets, they wanted to have a capability to actually order them by network address. Now, that worked in the past, but it used alphabetical ordering. Now we are smarter, and thanks to recent changes that we limit ourselves to only Postgres as a supported database, it was much easier. So now you can easily order subnets, and we take the IP address into consideration. So even though the 2 is 5th character and alphabetically it's after 1, this gets first because 20 is lower than 100. Obviously, that works also for IPv6 addresses, so you can easily order networks by the network addresses. All right, and the last thing that I want to show today is some new macros. So you may have seen some report templates in the past, but most of the time they contain a macro called load hosts, which we tend to call loader. But that was that was the only one that we had in the core for loading objects. We had some more introduced from plugins, But now we actually have many more macros for loading objects. That is useful because in safe mode, you didn't have another way how to load additional data that you may want to use if you generate a report of them. Now, there are multiple or more new macros. As you can see here is the list as of now. Load host, that was one that was already there, but we can now load users, domains, host groups, and other potentially interesting things. And also the capabilities of these macros were improved. So you can no longer specify just the search syntax and some includes and preload, but also you can tweak the batch size and even limit how many records you want to find and specify the area of attributes you want to load from the database. This is especially useful if you need to do some performance tweak. Now, in order to show you how that works, we can create very, very simple report in here. So we can do something like load, let's say, users, and then iterate over each record. And let's go over collection. And everything that happens in this cycle obviously happens for every user that is loaded through this macro. So we can do report from, and then you specify key and the value. So the key would be, let's say we want to have a list of users.
Marek, I can't see what you're presenting right now. It could be just me. Do the others see this?
Anyone else see the editor?
No, I cannot see that.
So we're still on.
Let me reshare the screen. Okay, how about now? Can you see the editor?
No, we still see the report templates page.
That's weird. All right, let me try to enter the page again. Or do you see, what do you see now?
We see the report templates page.
Yeah, just the index page
Okay.
for report templates.
That's interesting.
Maybe you can access the code from GitHub.
Okay, do you see another window now?
Yeah, we see
Yes.
the Fedora.
Perfect. So I'll just need to log in a different browser. I'll need to add some SSL exception, but back. All right, so hopefully you'll see the editor in a second. Can you see the editor now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yep.
All right, so this is the list of the macros I was talking about, and just for sake of the time, I'll quickly show you how we could create a report for generating all the users we have in the system. So you use the load users macro, that is loading all the users from your database, and as long as the interesting attribute is enabled in the safe mode, and usually the models have them enabled, you can construct the report like this: report row, name, or we can use a login here and let's say email address. And then at the end, you just do report ender, and that should be mostly it. Typo each. Okay. Right. Now we get a simple CSV report, so we see all the users, and in this case, there's an email address. If I actually would switch from to a default, or sorry, to a different context, I would get more users. But just to show you, I could use additional parameters in here, such as limit. here, if you want to investigate what else I can specify, here's the example. But I could specify things such as search, admin is false, let's say, or true. I can specify, let's say, a limit, how many records I want to load from database and things like that. So if I render that, well, I guess I don't have admins here. If I delete the search and just keep the limit in here, I should see two records in the report. Yeah, I guess that's all from my part.
Thank you. Moving on, we have Raul to talk about the single sign-on for Foreman.
Thanks, Ori. I will share my screen. So, single sign-on with Foreman. We are implementing single sign-on with the help of OpenID Connect. But before that, let me just brief you with the feature. So, there is a drawback to this feature, and that is a heavy setup, but that's only one-time setup. For this feature, we need to configure Foreman. So the prerequisites for this feature would be a working Foreman setup, a working Keycloak setup. Now, in terms of OpenID Connect, Keycloak is basically an OpenID provider, as they call it. So you could use any OpenID provider of your own wish. But for this demo, I'll be using Keycloak. You need to do some Foreman settings and then Keycloak settings. Let me walk you through them. So Foreman settings, there are 5 settings that you need to do. Let me share those settings with you. So there, if you see on the Foreman authentication, if you go to Foreman settings and inside the authentication tab, you will see 5 settings. One is OIDC algorithm, that is OpenID Connect algorithm, the audience, the issuer, and JWKS URL. With that, you will also define the logout URL where you want to log out. So after logout, where you want to go. So these are the 5 options that you need to provide to Foreman. Now, where will you get these options from? These options, every OpenID provider, just like Keycloak, will have a .well-known URL. So every OpenID provider will have a .well-known URL. There you will find all these endpoints. So inside the settings, we need something like JWKS URI. So you can just copy this URL and paste it inside your settings, and things should be fine. So that's how you fill up the settings, those 5 settings. Another requirement is Keycloak settings. So first thing, you need to register your client. You need to identify its access type and change accordingly. And the third thing you require is to define a lifespan of token. Let me explain you what I mean by this. So this is how Keycloak looks like. So what you can do is you can always create a realm for your project, and inside realm you will have something called as clients. Now you need to register clients. I have registered many, but right now I'm using this client. So you need to register a client, and once registered, you will land up on this page. Now on this page, you have something called as access type. So for different applications, you can have different types of access types. So the recommended type, I would just give you in short that if you're using a server-side application just like Foreman, and you're using it for the UI, so you would use the access type as confidential. But if you're using Hammer, say, it's a client-side application, so you would be using a public access type, something like that. And the third thing mentioned in the slides was the access token lifespan. So if you see the advanced setting here, you can set the access token lifespan. For testing purpose, I've set it to 1 minute, but usually it's set to 5 minutes. And that's the recommended time. So yeah, let's move ahead. Let's understand what we're trying. That was an overview of what kind of a setup you require. Now let's move into what the workflow is for OpenID Connect and with an OpenID provider. So we have 3 things in the picture. I will explain the Hammer part of it today. So how you can authenticate a user using Hammer and OpenID flow with an OpenID provider. So you have Hammer CLI. Inside Hammer CLI, you give your command with some credentials to Keycloak. Now these credentials will include the username and password and the realm and client ID of the user that it belongs to in Keycloak. So you give credentials to Keycloak. Keycloak performs authentication on Keycloak's side, and as an OpenID provider, it it gives a response in terms of an access token. Now, Hammer takes this access token and passes this access token to Foreman. Foreman server will validate this access token. It will check for its source, and it will check for its audience type and things like that. It will check if the source is correct. Once the token is validated, Foreman creates a user inside the Foreman database and creates a session for that, and creates a Foreman session for that user. Now this session this session will create a session ID, and the session ID is then passed to Hammer CLI, which it stores in a file. So in short, Hammer CLI gets the token from Keycloak, and that token is passed to Foreman. Foreman validates the token and creates a user in the Foreman database. Once the user is created, it creates a session for the user, and that session is stored by Hammer CLI for further use. So that's in short how the OpenID Connect workflow works. And let's see the demonstration. So before we see the demonstration, let me show you what a token is. So many of us don't know what a token is. A token is basically a JWT token. A JWT token consists of three parts, the first being the header, the second being the payload, and the third being its signature, all being differentiated with a dot. So there are three parts to a token, and when this token is passed to Foreman, we check all three sections of this token. We check if the signature is valid, we check if the header has the correct algorithm, and we check if payload has correct claims as they were present in Keycloak. So we perform all the checks, and once the checks pass, we create a user on the Foreman side. Moving to the demonstration, I would first like to go to our Foreman page and get to the users. If you see, let me make it any organization and any location, just so that you know I'm not cheating. So here you see there is only one user registered right now, that is admin. So we don't have any other user right now. What we will do is we will go to Hammer and we will do Hammer auth status right now. We will see that we are using sessions, but there's no user that has logged in yet. So we will use this command, which says -d for debug. We won't require that, but I've used it right now. Auth login OAuth, and then we pass the token endpoint. Now this endpoint comes from the well-known URL that I first showed you in this presentation. And you need to pass the token endpoint. You need to pass client ID that you have created on Keycloak and the username and password. So once you create this, once you have all the credentials sent to Keycloak, Hammer will basically in the backend go to Keycloak, do the authentication, and Keycloak in return will return us with an access token which Foreman will validate, and a user will be created. Now, if we see the Hammer auth status, we would know that there is a user session exists and currently logged in as an user XYZ. Now, interesting part here is if we check now what users we have in Foreman, okay, I think I need to change the pages so that it loads. If you see, we have an external user here, and there is an XYZ user created. So that's how authentication works. What we can do now is Hammer auth logout so that the user is logged out. And for demonstration purposes, I would like to delete this user from Foreman 2. Okay. There is one more flow that I would like to share with everyone. That is the two-factor authentication. Before that, there is an interesting thing which I would like to show is the sessions. So inside sessions, if you cat this file, you would see that since we logged out, the session ID got null. The auth type is still preserved as OAuth password grant. So the way which the flow in which we send the credentials to Keycloak or any OpenID provider is called OAuth password grant, and the username was XYZ. Now, let me show you another workflow that I was talking about, which is the two-factor authentication. So let's understand what parameters we are sending for this. For two-factor authentication, we need authorization endpoint, we need the token endpoint, we need the client ID, and we need the redirect URI. So if you understand correctly, we did not send credentials here. Rather than sending the credentials, we will have to type the credentials, or maybe you can do a OTP login, or you can do a smart card login, or any kind of two-factor authentication. So once I press enter, it gives me a URL. I copy this URL and paste it in my browser. Okay, yeah. So once I paste it in my URL, this would bring me to a login. This would bring me to an authentication page. Now this page here is just asking me for a normal login, but it could be anything. It could be a smart card authentication. It could be a OTP, as you configure it inside your Keycloak. On successful authentication, it will give me a code, which I will again copy, and I need to paste the code here. Once the code is pasted, the user will get authenticated. This kind of a flow is called as authentication code grant flow. So now if we see hammer auth status again, we've been logged in as the user XYZ. And if we go back to our Foreman page and check for users, okay, I need to again go to some other page and see for external users. And there you see you have an external user. So that's how you can authenticate from the hammer side. Now, moving on, I will just close all the tabs that I had opened and just start fresh again. So yeah. So now that was the hammer side of things. Now let's see how things work in the UI. So if I have my Foreman setup working on CentOS 7 Catilo Devil localhost example.com, I will just go on the Foreman URL and press enter. This will in turn redirect me to Keycloak. It will redirect me to the Keycloak, and I will do my authentication here. Again, this could be anything like OTP or a two-factor authentication as you have configured in Keycloak. And once you log in, according to the permissions that you have from Foreman assigned to this user, you will see the dashboard. Since here, since we don't have, since I haven't assigned it to a group, it will not have required permissions to do things like creating hosts or stuff like that, but yeah. And once you log out of here, you will see there is an SSO functionality working. So you won't really log out, but you will see this page. And you can log in again. And the JavaScript doesn't load, but that's fine. Yeah, there you go. So that's pretty much it from my side. I'm still working on how to work on with refresh tokens here and give a better logout experience. And that would be it for this feature. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Raul. Moving on to Ian with clearing host substatus.
All right, thanks, Ori. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, excellent. So what I'm going to be demonstrating here is just a quick showing of the new host substatus clearing feature. So if you've ever, say, ran some kind of task on a bunch of machines and that task failed, and you knew that, maybe you did the task on accident or for some reason you ran that, but you know the failure is not a big deal. But now you see all of your hosts, they all have either the orange info or the red X's on them, it can be really difficult for you to tell now where new errors are popping up. So now we've added a feature for you to clear these substatuses so you can make your host turn green again. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can do it through either the UI or you can do it through the API. So what I have set up here is just a host whose errata calculation failed. So you can see on the right here, there's a clear. So all you have to do is click the clear, and then the page will reload, and then the status goes away, and the machine is green again. Nice and easy. So let me show you quickly how to do it through the API. So I'm going to recalculate the errata, and this is going to successfully fail. So I will reload the page. And you'll see the errata warning is back up again. So I'm going to bring up my terminal. And so this API point to grab the substatus was already here. So that API is just hosts, the host ID, and then status, and then your substatus type. So in this case, it's errata. So I'll grab that substatus. You see here, just like in the UI, it says could not calculate the errata status. Now, if you want to get rid of that status, you just have to do a delete to the same API endpoint. So we do an HTTP delete on that, and then it sends some info. We know it succeeded. And then here we go. So you can see that the substatus had cleared. And now we just have a couple other checks just to make sure you don't do anything silly, like if you try to delete a substatus that doesn't exist. Or also, if you try to delete the global substatus. Yeah, you can't delete global substatus. Or I can try deleting errata again. It says status errata doesn't exist. So we make sure that you don't do anything bad. And that's pretty much it. This is a simple feature, but it should be very helpful to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we have two demos today by Leo, the taxonomy scope for interface domain and warning in job rerun. Leo, to you.
Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, sure. So can you see my screen? Everything goes okay?
Yes, we can.
So my first change is it's a half bug fix, half feature. Some client got problem that when you were creating new interface, create host form, you got problems that there were listed all domains from all organizations and locations. So right now, if you choose default organization and, for example, let's say Asia location, in the interface tab, there will be only domains from the Asia. For example, if you choose, let's say, Europe, you will see domains only from Europe. That's my first thing. And the second thing is also regarding the taxonomies. When you're running job right now, you can see the original organizations and locations. And if you will click on the rerun, and your organization, let's say, will be different, you will get warning, because sometimes it can cause problems. Let's say you were running just on the domains, and from any locations could be different from the default location. So to run the parameters and the host number can be a little bit different. So there's just warning about different taxonomy, and your user can change your parameters. And yeah, that's from me.
Thanks. Now we'll move to Ron, who's going to show us using the intervals middleware with API call.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
And sharing my screen.
We can see it.
Cool. So last time we spoke about the API middleware, how it works, how to use it. This time I wanted to show you how to run, let's say, an API or any other Redux action in interval. So as you can see on every page in Foreman, we have the notification action running. You can see we have a notification request, success with the API. And I want to show you how to actually create it. So if we go to the notification component, we can see that as it starts, you can see the start notification pulling. It receives a URL, and it's actually an action, a very basic action. We are using the get from the API middleware. This is how to import it. And to add it to interval, you can add the interval key, or we can use the with interval helper, which basically what it does, it just adds the interval key, and you can even not mention it. It will use the default interval, just in case. Once the interval middleware will receive any action with the interval key, first it will check if the interval exists, because we store it in store. If it exists, it will throw an error, and if not, it will take the original action without the interval key, because we don't want to get into a crazy loop of intervals. Then we create the set interval, which is a function from the window.setInterval, which return the ID. So now, if I go back to the store, we can see here we have, first of all, we have the API. So for example, the notification key we received, the response, currently I got nothing, the status, and I also have the interval middleware, which store only the interval ID. So if I want to destroy it from anywhere, I can just click on the Redux store, get ID, and clear it. But the best way to do it is in the component will unmount, or if you're using the use effect or things like this, just return in the end stop notification pulling. Here it's an action, very simple action. See where it is. So stop notification pulling. I also use the helper of stop interval with the key. What this stop interval does, let's jump to its place. I just get the key and the type of stop interval, and inside the interval middleware, if the type is stop interval, it first checks if it was registered or not, and if it does, it do clear interval. So in this easy way, you can run it on everything you want. It will just start to loop, and it doesn't have to be just APIs. Another cool thing, because in this case we are going to use it mostly for APIs, I created this helper when document is visible. So you can see in the Redux DevTools, let's clear it. Let it run one time. Okay, now let's go to a different page. We can wait. If we are not in the Foreman page, it will not be invoked. As you can see, it ran just once.
Ron, we're back to the blue jean. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now it's back.
There is a delay. So now when I'm back to Foreman page, you can see that it continued to run. So it saves some API calls. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. That is all for our demo today. Thank you for the presenters. Thank you for everyone joining, and see you next time.